Happy spring, beautiful listeners. I am recording this in the month of April, and I have a pool in my backyard because my other business is a swim school teaching adults beginning and overcoming fear in water. And let me tell you, the pool is a mess. It's a mess because the trees are beautiful and lovely, and the birds are beautiful and lovely, and there are spring flowers dropping into the pool, and there are seed buds and debris like that the birds are picking up and taking places and making their nests and dropping it in the pool. So it is beautiful and wonderful and a mess, which, it's just like our marriages, just like our relationships. They are beautiful, they are wonderful, and they are a mess. If you're on my social media pages on Facebook or Instagram, you have been following the theme of growth this month. I've been talking about growth because we're in the season of budding growth. So I thought I'd talk about that a little bit with you today on the podcast of what does it mean to grow in your relationship? And what does that look like? Why would you want to do it? What is growth all about? We hear about growth mindset in a lot of workplace situations. What does it mean to have a growth mindset or be in growth in your relationship? One of my very favorite posts that I put up, partly it's very favorite because it's two pictures of my beautiful, wonderful family that I love so much. But I said in the post is that your kids will grow up no matter what, but your relationship only grows with intention. So time does change things. The passage of time, something like your kids. And I've got a picture of I think it's actually an Easter picture. When my kids were real little, we would do Easter egg hunts in the bay or on the fire engine. They had an out of service truck or something. I'd take the kids there, and they enjoyed doing Easter egg hunts there. So it's a picture. We're sitting on the back of one of the rigs, and my kids are little. And the other picture is the first day, or actually the day before our oldest child set off on a 5-month backpacking adventure on his own when he was just barely 18. Hadn't really done much backpacking, but he did a hike it's called the Pacific Crest Trail. So he hiked from the Mexico border to the Canadian border. So there's a picture of the four of us, and the kids aren't so little anymore. Time goes by. Yeah, he was on the trail that year. No Easter egg hunt for him that year. But so that kind of growth, it just happens, right? I just keep feeding them and they grow and they change. Adults, we grow and change too. You'll probably see a little noticeable difference with my spouse and I from one picture to the other. We're physically growing and changing too, maybe not in those socially delightful ways that children do, but we do grow and physically change in that way. And so time does make some things change. But time also doesn't really change this idea of growth mindset, which is a little bit different. And one of the things that I saw for myself and I see for my clients is we sit around and we think, well, when the season changes, when we get through this particular time, then I'm going to feel better, right? Have you ever heard yourself saying that? Once the kids are older, once we're out of probation, once that promotion has been reached, once, they've processed and healed from that traumatic call, right? We kind of put this hook on when this thing has happened, then I'm going to feel better. That is the ultimate block of growth mindset. This is the ultimate block that can hold us in one place and is really a kind of a dangerous place to put ourselves, because what happens when we keep looking towards the external to change for us to feel better or different, we don't really get to the root of why we are feeling the particular way we are feeling. Now, sometimes there is a big event, and so you are in the midst of a powerful feeling. And when you move away, like moving away from a hot fire, right, you no longer feel quite the intensity of the hot fire. So there can be event situations where, yeah, when you're in the midst of it, right, when a loved one close to you really physically is in your presence and they are dying, let's say, you feel that very powerfully. And there's some distance of time because it's not right in front of you. You do have more moments where you're not feeling it quite so powerfully. Although with grieving, I'm not going to go too far into the grieving conversation, but with grieving, right, you can pick another moment in time where you're looking at a photograph or you smell something that reminds you back of that person. And the feelings you feel can be just as powerful and big and full body as they were when you were at the heat of the event, right? When that person, you were actually sitting with that person and they were going through their end of life. So let me give you another little story here to show an example how time and situation doesn't change where we don't have growth mindset. So this is, I don't know if my mom's listening to my podcast yet or not, but tell a little story about my mom or my parents. They have been married for over 50 years. So they've been married a long time. And sometimes my dad puts the dishes in the sink instead of the dishwasher. Sometimes, they have to soak. When they very first got married, my dad really didn't know how to do anything, let's just say domestic, right? He had a special metal box that he would send his dirty laundry home when he was in college back to his mom to wash, and then she'd send it back. So my mom was very surprised when she married this man and found out he had a mother who did all of these things for him and he didn't know how to do them. And such began this narrative of my dad not knowing how to do the dishes, not doing the dishes correctly. Even after he did learn how to do the dishes, right? And came to realize, yeah, I can do the dishes too. It isn't just my wife's responsibility, even though my mother did all the dishes. My wife doesn't have to be the one to do all the dishes. He doesn't do them in the same way that my mom does them. So there's this complaint, let's say, that my mom has that probably started way back when they very first were married, that my dad, he'd leaves the dishes in the sink instead of putting them in the dishwasher. Now, I've seen this man over the years. He does put the dishes in the dishwasher. And especially in retirement, and especially as, he's taken care of her when she's had surgeries and things like that, he does actually manage to get the dishes clean. But my mom still has this way of feeling terrible, right? She complains about this and feels really bad. She suffers over this. Why won't he do the dishes correctly? This is an area of their marriage, one little sample of the area of their marriage, where she hasn't had growth mindset around. Even though the circumstances have changed, right? He's not the 22-year-old or 21-year-old or however old he was when they got married, 23, something like that, who had no idea about doing dishes. He's not even the full-time working person who is not, who's coming in and out with doing dishes. He is now the retired guy who does the dishes with pretty good frequency. But even though the situation has changed, she still suffers around this because she hasn't really taken the time or hasn't had the desire to see the impact that this is having in her life and having in her relationship with my dad. And she, right now, it still feels more comforting for her to continue to have this complaint because of, at this point, it's time immemorial and habit, right? And our brain loves a habit. It loves to do things on automatic. It's much more efficient, even though we kind of feel terrible, right? She doesn't feel great thinking that he doesn't know how to do the dishes and she has to do them, right? It doesn't feel great to her, but it's a habit that she has. She hasn't grown beyond this way of thinking. She hasn't grown beyond what is really at the cause of her feeling badly in this little segment of their relationship. I add that in there because they do overall have a good relationship, have a great relationship, right? They love and care for each other. But there's these ways of being we have with each other in our relationships that we can let fall into a habit way of being that really doesn't grow us as an individual or grow our relationship. So in my first picture, when our kids were young and little, there's a lot of time and a lot of thinking of when we get past this stage, I will feel better. So I'm waiting for some external thing to change, right? The kids are easier and less demanding. Then I'm going to feel better. We'll feel more connected. We'll feel more love. We'll have more time for each other. But the thing I noticed is actually when I would find myself saying the same thing my mom does about the dishes to my own spouse. I could step back and notice, well, yes, there is some factual truth to there are times where my spouse does put the dishes in the sink when the dishwasher is empty and they could go directly in there. My way of thinking about it and complaining about it and being upset about it is really just kind of a habit that I sort of inherited from my mom. We do this. It's okay. It's called being human. But I started to think and started to take an outside look to this. I didn't just stick in living in habit. Through my coaching, through being able to really step back and take this 10,000-foot view of my relationship, of myself, of my thoughts, of my patterns, I was able to kind of pause and see, wait a second, this really isn't serving me. Well, sometimes there's some fact in it. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just a knee-jerk reaction. And I started to get curious. Do I want to continue this? Is this really showing up in some sort of useful way in my life? Does my being upset about this or complaining about this or being self-righteous about this, does this actually produce anything useful in my relationship? Does it make me hold true to what I really want, which is to feel love and connection and appreciation? And, I've decided, it really doesn't. And I actually plan and expect at this point in my life, in my relationship, that at some point I'll get to celebrate 50 years. Do I really want to be complaining about the same thing? What if I could be complaining about something totally different? I have no idea what it might be at this point, but it actually kind of sparks my interest and my curiosity. If all the things that I habitually complain about today weren't those things anymore, if I was able to let those things go, or to see what the impact of those were on my relationship. If I was able to bring in this growth way of being into these complaints, gosh, it's not that I'm never going to have complaints. We do. It's part of being human. But it seems like such a more interesting kind of adventure to see, what would the complaints be 50 years from now if it's not just me going after the same old habit, the same old way of being, the same old being stuck in a rut? Growth mindset is about getting out of our rut way of thinking, right? We think the same way over and over and over again. We believe it like it's gravity. It just seems like truth to us. And we keep producing the same thing over and over again. So if the thing that we're producing over and over again feels great, is what we want, right? Then go for it. Notice that. Lean into it. But if the things that you're producing is not what you want, and you're making statements like, well, in the future, this circumstance will be different, so it'll be better or easier. Just notice it probably won't. Because while the circumstance may change, like my dad actually does do more of the dishes. That circumstance has for sure changed from the time he was 23 to 70, whatever he is now. That has changed, but my mom's feeling has not, right? Because of the way that we think about things. Okay, so here's the tricky part. The tricky part is I can't just say, okay, I'm no longer going to complain about what happens with the dishes. Now, I could just say that. I could just let it go in a snap or an instance. It is true that people do change things on a dime, right? That's why there's a real expression out there. You can suddenly just really powerfully decide to think a different way, to do things a different way. But for most of us, for most things, we have to kind of unwind these old thinking patterns. And it's never about just shoving in a happy Pollyanna thought. That doesn't work either. That just leads us to more suffering, right? And resisting who we are right now and where we are currently at. You can wish and hope that you're in a completely different habit and way of being in the world. But if you don't let yourself start with exactly where you are, you just end up kind of piling things on top. I had a friend recently who said she's spent years and years and years practicing meditation, and it only ended up increasing her sense of hating herself more because she never felt like she could get it right? She couldn't let go of those negative thoughts or find a way to be, good at it, let's just say, in a short version. And so she beat herself up over it and she would feel worse. So the start is just to kind of notice, what are some of these habit ways of thinking and how are they serving me or not? And then we can slowly ladder to another place, towards another place. We can have a goal out there. I have a goal that I never get upset with the dishes being in the sink again. But the reality is, I probably am going to sometimes. But what coaching does, and when you have somebody else coach with you, like me, when I coach with a client, I help give that perspective, right? That when you're in the middle of a habit, it's really hard to see that you're in the middle of that habit. And so having an outside perspective helps you to see the muck that you're in. And then it's about self-coaching, right? It's about coaching yourself through these moments. And the first step of coaching yourself through the moment is to actually see the moment when it's happening. You may not be able to change anything or do anything different to start with. That's okay. But simply being able to see this place that you're in, to see, oh, here I'm in the moment, right, is a step towards making a change in there. This is growth mindset. This is how you grow your relationship, is to really see and be curious about what it is. It's not hoping for the situation to change or time to go on, because time going on, if you're in a place that things are going well and you know how to continue to cultivate that, then that's what you'll cultivate and grow. But if things are not going well, they don't feel good, this is what you're going to continue to cultivate and grow. So time does not help. It's not like our kids where they get taller, they get stronger, they learn more things, they get more skills, they change and grow in that sort of way over time. Our relationships, whatever's happening in them right now, no matter how the circumstance changes, you're going to continue to grow what you have right now. And if it's good and you love it, fantastic. But if it's not, this is where we end up going down the chain of resentment, the chain of overwhelm, the chain of disconnection. My spouse and I, we never really have like big fights. That's not us. That's not our style. It's not our way of being in the world to have big knockdown, drag out fights. But boy, did we have these small, little insidious things that really started to add up over time. And it wasn't until I was able to put a pin in it and to start to get some perspective and really start to see, do I want to be making these same complaints, feeling the same way when I'm 50 years into this relationship that I have right now? I got to make a choice. I got help and I got to make a choice. And now we are in the place of cultivating the growth that we want to see in our lives. Is it perfect? Do we always do it right? Are there times when there's complaining? Totally, right? Not totally that it's perfect, but totally that there's complaints, right? It is part of being human. But the complaints I have today, they are not the complaints I had 5 years previously. And not just because, we're not doing diapers anymore, right? And parenting has changed or work situations have changed. It's because I've changed. I've grown up. That means my relationship has too. All right, my friends, be committed to you and your growth and your loving of yourself. Be present. Feel what you feel right now, even if it's uncomfortable. This is where you're going to get that information of where to go next. Show up in that space with curiosity and love for yourself and for your spouse. And take some action, right? You are here, you are listening, you are investing in your relationship. Take it to another step. You don't want to passively be bringing in information. You want to act on it, do something with it. Write something down from today. Join the Facebook group or the Instagram page. Talk to your spouse. Sign up for a time where you and I can actually talk one-to-one and see what are those habit ways of thinking that you would like to change, that you would like to be a person of growth instead of the habit of what it is. All right, take care, my friends. We'll see you next week. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can get every episode. And when you are ready to be in action, come find us. Facebook, Instagram, or our website. It's all the same name, relationshipsonfire.com. We've got that S on there. There's lots of us having relationships. So relationships with an S on fire.com. Thanks so much. Saying goodbye, your fire and water gal, Cori Myka. See you next time.